lips aren't moving and your arm is at your side, not holding up your phone. Which is good, because she says you're being watched by 13 people right this second, myself not included. I sighed. Tell her thanks. She hears. As for us, we can talk. Good. Typing was inconvenient. Thank you for your help back there. The warnings about the dangers so my friends didn't walk into traps. The little word changes that probably made a big difference. Sainthood and intensities and alienation. You got the second-generation trigger wrong, though. In my defense, I was typing fast. Keeping up with speech while processing what my power gives me can be hard. It was good. I'm grateful. Wow, Tattletale said. I heard a chair creak. I also heard commotion that might have been kids running around. Or dogs. You're trying real hard to be nice, aren't you? Try really hard to let me be nice without making a big deal of it or using it to be a festering pain in my ass. We'll try. No promises. Kenzie's safe? The kids are good? I asked. Safe, fed, and given a mood-altering quantity of double chocolate chip cookies, with Candy going the extra mile to look after your kid. Most of the 5 feet tall and shorter gang is watching the feeds and listening in on conversations. It's like putting a normal 10-year-old in front of the television with streaming TV, complete with them accidentally catching the PG-13 and R-rated stuff. I winced. What stuff? Byron and Tristan regaling Golem and Ava with the story of Tristan's almost first kiss. The gay chicken story, if you've heard it. Is this a cock joke? Truth or dare thing, where mean middle schoolers single out. Redundant. Oh, mean middle schoolers. Yeah. Well, the idea is they single out the homophobic or closeted members of their friend group and dare them to one-up each other in pretending to be lovers, until one gets too embarrassed to continue and gets the punishment game instead. Ah, that sounds like it could get uncomfortable. It was a good almost memory for him, I think, which is nice. But it got a bunch of mischievous, heartbroken brains into a particular mode and mindset. I recommend no sleepovers at Aunt Rachel's for a while. If they do happen, it's at your place instead, and you deal with the aftermath. I recommend extra hands on deck. I missed my team. No sleepovers, then. I don't think I'm jumping on top of that particular grenade, I said. Good warning, that. Though I have to wonder how Rachel would even handle that kind of mess. Stable duty, Tattletale said. You should see the way Amias and Nicholas stopped dead in their tracks when I said those 2 words. Small voices piped up in the background, unintelligible. What the hell are we doing, Tattletale? I asked. Right now? I know it's not what you're really asking, but for now, we're talking civilly. What's important is getting you calmed down enough that you can go back to that situation room you're avoiding right now without, I don't know, dropping something on that Eric fellow from a great height. That seems to be a recurring theme with you. Ah, fuck. You gotta go back. After that, we'll be mulling over options and where we need to allocate our resources. First things first. Bureaucracy was the issue? Yeah. Twat named Eric is shutting me down at every turn. I don't suppose you could dig up some dirt on him or get him off my back? I asked. I stopped for a second to consider. How dangerous a question is that to be asking? Like in terms of what could happen to him? Not too. In fact, I can pretty much guarantee that lookout over there is looking into him. Oh, look at that. Kid shoots me a guilty look. Kenzie's voice cutting into the call was startling. Not too loud, but still an input I wasn't expecting. Do you want the dirt? I've got dirt on him. LaRue, Pierce, a couple of other names around the table. Manic, Hicks, Cabezas. I found surveillance camera footage, home PC stuff. I leaned against the wall, looking up at a flickering light. Fuck. Not unless he's a chite plant or anti-parahuman agent or something equally nefarious. Nope. He is really opinionated about the old PRT, though, instead of the current wardens. Look out, I said. Reiterating, you shouldn't give it to me. You shouldn't go get that stuff on your own initiative. It makes enemies. It's invasive. It's not right. Not unless we have more of a clue there's something nefarious at play. Okay, Kenzie said, sounding crestfallen. Crestfallen was okay when she was getting a lecturing for breaking the rules. Remember what I said. Follow the law, do what's right, reach out, minimize regrets. Yeah, she said. Gonna go do stuff now. Sorry. Thanks for the help with Amy. Let's work on the other stuff. Uh-huh. As far as I could tell, that was the point. She was off the call, probably still listening in. Threats, I said. What are we chasing? That question? That's you procrastinating, hun. You and I are focusing on getting you back into that situation room, because networking with the wardens and having full access to them is important. We can't rely on our back door. Entertain me, I said. Threats. I'm thinking they're blind spots for Contessa, or they're threats so minor Dinah hasn't thought to ask questions about them. Okay, walk me through it. I'll fact-check. Blind spots. Simorg. Yes. Mama Mathers. Soft blind spot. She can look, but doesn't want to. Yes. Portals. They are a factor. So is the epicenter of the cracking, city's heart, near the old Warden's HQ, but we're lucky because that's where the Simorg is, too. We can ignore it. Powerful capes, Valkyrie. We have eyes on Valkyrie, and she's self-aware that she's a possible crisis point. So are her flock members. Only like 5% higher chance of being our breaking point, but, you know. Sleeper. Restless, but still around. Earth Zayin in the palm of his hand. He started to emerge. Legend faced him down. How? Leveled about 30 square kilometers of city. I nodded. He's dormant now? For now. If he had motivations for making one attempt, he's going to budge again soon. But I don't have the instinct he's our threat. He's background. Someone else's problem. I nodded. This was good. Well, not good, but this was progress. What am I missing? For other blind spots, teacher's tech, his portals, a lot of the cracking, and a few traps he set using tinkered replications of Mama Mathers. Using what? Nothing like you're picturing. He had tinkers scan her, copy her power, and work out stuff like quantum tripwires, tripping when you look at them. There was a commotion, with a rustling of the phone microphone. I heard Tattletale's protest. Hi! A more unfamiliar voice said. I heard more indistinct grumbling from Tattletale in the background. Hi? Imp here. I thought it was important to notify you that whenever Tattletale says quantum, she is talking out of her ass. Every last syllable is enunciation by way of but. Okay, I said, duly noted. I'd really like to get back to the conversation, though. It's kind of really important. Ah, that's sweet, she said, before handing the phone to Tattletale. Not sweet. Necessity, I told myself. Sorry about that. There's a reason I hole myself up in an office for days on end. It's because this slot plus a thinker headache add up to a quantum headache, Tattletale said, sounding like she was speaking in a direction that wasn't to the phone. Not a thing, I heard Imp. For all her complaints, Tattletale sounded more like the cocky, confident villainess I tended to imagine than she had since our reunion in New Brockton Bay, for lack of a better word. Quantum tripwires, I reminded her of the conversation. Yes, devices that trip in response to being observed, with big flashes that stick in your vision or mind's eye, but mostly it's the portals. Contessa is on her way back from Chite. She's got a captive teacher with her. She let a group in there and leaned on them pretty heavily to get around the special countermeasures he put in place. She's got teacher, so he's out of the picture? You dealt the knockout blow, reset his thrall network, took away the addictive impulses of being under his sway. His thralls took him hostage and kept him while fending off inquiries from Chite government. Custodian and Ingenue are still in the wind, one of them literally. One off the mental checklist. Any other blind spots? Only that Contessa is still malnourished, with slight atrophy of the limbs. It's slowing her down. She's also slowed down because she's having to reset her layers of defenses. Stuff she'd ask herself regularly to guard herself against every eventuality in the days and weeks. After her trauma of being captured during her one taste of freedom and independence, I think she's being extra slow and extra careful. No blind spots, but factors. Okay, I said. Moving on to Dinah? Before that, still on the subject of Contessa. Shoot. Big threats. There's a lot of shit that a precog of her caliber could have gone after, right? A few things. Machine Army? Stuff like the Machine Army. It's hard to ignore the evolving, endlessly reproducing machine hellscape that's encroaching on our front door, so I think the Wardens have that base covered. Fair, Tattletale said. You want to make sure we're leaving as few stones unturned as possible. Yeah, I said. For what it was worth, I was happy to be focusing on the task. I felt more me than I had when trying to sleep, showering, eating, or playing the secret commander and shot caller in the Situation Room. Okay, so my mind goes straight to the files. Imp told me about your little library. Yeah, don't remind me of that. I'm still pissed about the kerosene she poured on my stuff. And the fact she tried to burn down Swansong's apartment. So, okay. Quarantine sites are a starting point when you want big and problematic, while still being easy to forget about. Not something I ever dwelt on. Most of the quarantine sites around America became places to send the PRT capes who weren't palatable for public consumption, or the ones who couldn't play nice with others. Tall walls, patrols, specific duties, right? Sure. Armsmaster could have ended up there if they hadn't found busy work for him. Maybe. They might have thought he'd rebel. Pastor, I was just thinking recently, when Sveta was getting care, it would have been great to take the guy out of commission or bring in for study, because he would have given us a ton of hints about broken triggers and Case 53s, which makes me think... We're in the right department. Dead. We're sure? Yep. There was Ellisberg, of course, Nilbog. In custody, cooperating, effectively retired. Turns out that living off of cupcakes made of goblin puke and having next to no mental or social stimulation kind of grinds you down. Flint. We don't know about Flint. Nobody knows about Flint. Between Dragon and Jean Wynn, I got access to almost everything, and there were details in there. A cape popped up who made a lot of people in their vicinity develop coronas and trigger. They'd organized a villain group put together from as many of their triggers as they could, and that villain group had mutinied, deciding to slay the goose that laid the golden eggs, cut it open, and see if they could find what ticked. Oh, I see where this is going. Not even that metaphorically a carving up of the golden goose. They cut the cape up. Each member of the villain organization took a literal pound of flesh. With a lot of members, it was a lot of pounds of flesh. Teeth, eyes, ears, limbs, everything taken with care to keep the cape alive just in case it was important. And they'd scattered, and they'd gone after victims to force induct into their fucked up villain group. I remember them. Didn't know about the, pound of flesh placed near the victim? Induced triggering? Or fed to them along with the forced trigger situations, I don't know. But it worked for at least a few years. But that's before our time. The dark decade after the Siberian murdered hero, she said. Uncomfortable to think about. That's about it for North American quarantines. A lot of the unquarantined Class S threats died in the fight against Scion. I could have elaborated on motivations, but I felt like that might have spoiled our little hero-villain truce here. Yeah, Tattletale said. Intentional, I think, as much as anything was then. I had so many friggin' questions on that subject, but no, again, it would have spoiled things. Khepri had let them die while fighting Scion. Tattletale agreed with the hypothesis. So many questions. The blasphemies, if you want to go international, Tattletale supplied. My files don't go that international. It's mostly PRT stuff and what I was able to dredge up online. A group of tinkers get a spark of inspiration, dig up the resources, and start building. Each one of them builds something almost perfectly identical. Huh. But, Tattletale said, with dramatic flair and what I imagined was a smug grin at knowing something I only had situation and battle notes on, here's the thing. They're each in a different country, a few thousand miles apart in one case. Talking online? I asked. Nope. Phone? Nope. No contact. They weren't even very similar tinkers. 3 coincidental builds. That to me says something about the agent's network, the landscape we saw, interplay. I trailed off, expecting Tattletale to pick up the slack. She didn't. What? I asked. More than 3. We think it was 8, but it could have been 10. They required specific materials to make. Once the first 2 showed up, the heroes started getting ahead of the tinkers. 2 tinkers weren't very experienced. 1 died around then, 1 got arrested. 1 made it past heroes to build the 3rd. 5 were foiled in their robbery attempts. I nodded to myself. Good fucking job on the heroes' part. The notion of there being 5 or 7 more spooked me. Are they active? I asked. They were active, but aimless. In our general Gimmel Europe area. Operating separately. Now they're together again, as of the last week. Make of that what you will. Make of that what I will? Big ask. To me, that sounds like a symptom of overall weird agent behavior. I don't disagree. Thing is, none of those are really considerations, Vic, Tattletale told me. Except the machine army, except blasphemies. Where does that get us? Except you procrastinating on going back into that room to not blackmail the lacrosse player in the purple shirt who may or may not have a powerful relative who got him into the same university you applied to. I pulled the phone away from my ear, halfway hoping I could see a video image of Tattletale's face. You read the dirt? The point is that you're procrastinating. I'm stopping to think, I said. Emphasis on the stop. Don't get me wrong, hun. Not faulting you. Sometimes I need to shut off the lights, send the kids away to muck stables or be horrible to each other, and retreat from the world. Just don't pretend that's not what you're doing. Emphasis on the think part, I stressed. Collaborating with you. If we think about these guys and how they exist in the first place, they're questions. You're doubting her. I heard about the kid Cassandra's accusation. Now you're back to that? It's hard to ignore, isn't it? You have to ask a few different questions when you consider that those people and things existed. One, the obvious answer, is that they're blind spots. Too powerful, too messy, whatever. Certainly applies. They give me headaches, and I'm seeing this stuff in Sudoku vision. What? Never mind. The second answer is, she's Cauldron. She was, might still be in some way. I don't think you make Cauldron-level decisions for 3/4 of your life and then move on without carrying some of that with you, Tattletale said. How many of those threats were allowed to go on being threats, not because they were blind spots, but because they were useful to Cauldron or their goals? I asked. They made Case 53s, for fuck's sake. And speaking on behalf of my best friend, it was an evil thing to do to people. To children, sometimes. Our focus is on the present, not on the past. Do you think she's still keeping some useful pawns on hand? I think we start by asking if she's even on the same page as the rest of us. If she even wants to stop this calamity. Then we start asking what she's using in the way of pawns.
This was a production of Ward by Parahuman Audio. Ward and the Parahuman stories are written and owned by J.C. McCrae. You can find the original text and support the author at parahumans.net. For more of the Ward audiobook, as well as other community works, please visit parahumanaudio.com. Music for this chapter was by Evan Witt. Find out more at wittynotes.com. Editing by Samurai Buko. Narration by Robert Rain Ramsey. Find more of their work at our website. Thank you for listening. Ward by J.C. McRae. A production by Parahuman Audio. Performed by a cast of fans and volunteers. Please visit parahumanaudio.com to learn more. Thank you and enjoy. Arc 17, Sundown, Chapter 10. I walked, both because I was restless and because I knew I was being watched. Kenzie's filter made it appear like I wasn't talking or holding my phone to my ear, and it got weird if I was standing in a dim, damaged hallway for an extended period, staring at a wall and doing nothing else. It would raise concerns. So, for that matter, would talking to Tattletale. "How does she think?" I asked. "Contessa? She's lava," Tattletale replied. "The only volcano references in my recent memory are an analogy to the well of the agent's power with broken triggers and someone I hucked into a hillside. Why lava?" "Because I was going to say molasses, but there's nothing sweet about her. She's dangerous, and saying she thinks like molasses implies she's slow, which she is, but not like I want you to imagine." "Okay," I said. I could get on board with this kind of thinking, at least. Lava can spurt. It can reach surprisingly far when we're talking about molten rock that breaches the surface. If you get too close to it, you can get burned. It can do a shocking amount of damage, start fires that rage for days, whatever. But mostly, if you leave it alone, you get a steady stream that lands close to home and then pools out from there. I'm on board with the line of thinking, but explain that last bit for me. She starts every day with questions, anticipating, countermeasures, how to secure herself, how to secure her immediate goals. Drop her into a new situation with just her power and no context, and before she's formed a complete thought, she'll guarantee she's safe from the most immediate threats. You can't touch her. Like you can't touch lava. Then the lines of thought expand out from there, the pooling out, finding the cracks and exerting herself along them. How do blind spots factor in? For my metaphor? Bodies of water? I don't know. I'm ass-pulling, as Imp would put it. But the idea applies. The lava pools up and around. It builds. Walls, peaks, accumulations. She sets up stuff in the periphery or vicinity that impact or constrain the blind spot in question. For Scion, it was Case 53s. It was specific teams of specific power levels in various Earths, stuff hidden out of sight and stuff in plain sight. The PRT. It was distractions, it was delays, and it was encouragement for him, to get him where they needed him and when. I kept silent, digesting that, trying to imagine it in this context. There were people walking toward me in the hallway, and so I was forced to play nice and not say anything that would turn heads or get talked about in earshot of the others.
"Why do you ask?" Tattletale asked.
The coast was clear.
"Sorry, there were people. I had to wait before I replied." "I knew that. It's why I waited to reply."
Ah, her power.
"I can see you on camera," she clarified.
Oh.
"My line of thinking is, if she is a problem, knowing the angle helps. If she isn't, knowing the angle helps. If there's a threat that slipped her notice, it's possibly something that escapes her blind spots, and it's helpful to know how she sets things up and how something could slip by. If she set something up, it helps to know how she set things up, right?"
"Right," I said. I didn't know the exact way to where I was going, but I had some ideas. I'd come this way once before. This place was massive, and a lot of the time navigating it was like traveling across a city and marking the transition from suburb to commercial to high-end residences and then to industry. Once one knew the general feel of an area, it was a question of knowing whether to head north, south, east, west, up, or down. Up. Out toward the exterior wall.
"What do we look for?" I asked. "Groups?" "She pulls out, remember? Finds the channels and cracks. Teacher catching her reset everything, put months of distance between her and her pawns, for lack of a better way of putting it. So she deployed, and she started with herself, then reached out for tools closest to her, worked out from there. If it helps, I can't imagine it was personal."
I reached the top of the staircase, walked past some people who looked like refugees that were getting the lowdown on the work being done, and through a gate. The area was an interior roadway primarily meant for moving cargo and materials. Off to the right, there was a long corridor that led to the outside, with an extension that combined balcony, road, and helicopter landing pad, all running along the outside of the building. To my left was a drop, blocked off by a short railing. Cargo containers were scattered around, some recognizable from Gimel, others a little odd, adhering to different standards. There were scuffs of battle damage, abrasions, claw marks, stains. She said that if we took the route that would see Teacher captured, 2 members of my group would be dead or gone. Paraphrasing there, but... "Yes," Tattletale said. "And you lost 1. Option A was that 1 member would suffer for so long it might as well be forever. I got the answer about that. Precipice stuck in the doorway or something. The idea was that the city would lose its heroes in a hard-fought battle. Makes a kind of sense. Something like what we did last night, but more obstructive than penetrative." I didn't miss the "we did" as opposed to the "you did."
I made a sound. Option B was that we let him win. Back off, let him finish his plan. Subvert control over his people, close the portals. I can sort of see how that might have played out now. "I can too," Tattletale said. "It would have been last night, except we wouldn't have been in a rush. You at that same crystal near Teacher. No."
"No?"
"No, not you. Rain. One of the members of our group with a natural facility toward the crystals, instead of your brute mindset of, break it."
I rolled my eyes.
"Saw that."
"You cannot see that on surveillance camera," I spoke into the phone.
"I can see enough for my power to fill in the blanks."
"It would have cost hundreds of thousands of lives if we took option B," I said, quiet. Or so she said. She described it as being helpful in the long run, good somehow, kind of like how she thought Teacher was close to being on the right track. She said so when we confronted him at the very end.
A clue about how she thinks and what she prioritizes. She's taking a tack very close to that. I don't think she was lying when she said she was trying to find an outcome that would make our side happier overall. I do think she's liable to expand out beyond that after a week of mulling things over and expanding her reach and consideration.
I leaned heavily into the railing, the hard, narrow bar biting into my arm. I looked down at the loading deck below, at the gouges. Repaired parts where Swansong's power had kissed the metal floor.
So we're useful and we get consideration after freeing her. We get to be the pawns, but she appeals to our interests in a general sense, and then she moves on? It's all about the shortest path, Antares. Her power doesn't say, walk for 2 days to get to this location, talk to that person, if it can say that she should talk to the person next to her. Her goal was self-preservation. Your group, Imp, and the Heartbroken were next to her, and making you happy ensured you didn't hurt or stop her. You just happened to be close enough to the lava to get burned, too.
So the goal was survival. Even reaching out to us, the ABC thing, it was survival, or partially survival.
Partially revenge against teacher, yeah.
What is it now?
Equilibrium. A manageable, balanced state where things don't break down further. A foundation things can be built on. Probably the reason she liked the hundreds of thousands die eventuality is that a smaller population is easier to manage. Probably it has to do with reminding humanity why we're needed. That there are scary monsters out there that only the capes can stop. And, I don't think she's given up on her dream.
Her dream? I asked. I imagined Cauldron's control, influence, and power.
Standing on a beach, her power turned off, being free. It's an uncharitable view, but with my power supplying next to nothing, I'll build on what it's told me in the past and say that she's someone who let millions die, often in horrible ways, for the greater plan. I think it's possible she tells herself it's okay to let more than half of the population die, so long as things are stable thereafter. Things can be built up right. No overcrowding, no hunger, no resource dependencies on Chite or Shin, a better balance of cape and non-cape. And she gets to stand on a beach with her powers turned off without being ambushed.
Swansong died, and for what? We won that day, but I missed my friend. There had been something fun about wine and crackers and old movies, about being challenged. I wouldn't have been talking to Tattletale now if I held the views I had even 2 months ago about heroes and villains, white hats and black hats. I wouldn't have changed my views if it hadn't been for Swansong. The kernel of caring for Kenzie at the background, and the willingness to reinvent herself in the foreground. Seeing that look in her eyes after she had killed Beast of Burden. The willingness to go to jail. I don't think that's Contessa, I said. I'm not basing this on anything I can really define over a phone conversation. Gut feeling. But we talked to her, and I saw the look in her eyes as she outlined it all. How far away she wanted to be from the decision, which Sveta eventually foisted on her. I heard Tattletale. Gut feeling, I thought.
Wish I could tell you more, hon, Tattletale said. I don't have enough data.
Hey, Kenzie? I asked. No response. Do me a favor. Don't listen in. Don't look back at this past recording and dig this up to re-listen. I want this bit to be me and Tattletale. A pause. I wondered if she was listening after all. Surely Tattletale would...
Okay. There she goes, Tattletale said. Straight to the puppies.
There's puppies? I asked. Damn. Almost wish I was there.
It'd be awkward. Like how awkward your kid is feeling right now. You and this current project you have her handling, connecting you to your team. It's her only connection to breakthrough right now.
I know, just gotta get through today, I said. I gripped the railing with my hand that had the bandage around the missing fingernail, gripped the phone. My power changed.
Yep, Tattletale said. Floating phone earlier kind of gave it away.
I'm worried I changed.
Wouldn't rule it out. Is that a bad thing?
It's a thing. It could be bad. It's hard to separate it out. How much is me? How much is her?
And how much is the fact that you almost died last night? You were burned all over. You got a very concrete reminder of how mortal you are. You got a massive wake-up call about just what exactly it is we're dealing with. Powers, greater forces. It takes a while to wrap your brain around that, once you're faced with the reality of it.
That feels like a cop-out, I said.
Or is saying it's your power doing the talking the cop-out? Didn't it work for Amy because it was a cop-out?
I gripped the railing harder. I'm really hoping that's not what she takes away from it.
Or you'll ask your dad to off her?
Okay, I said. I closed my eyes. This isn't exactly what I was hoping to get out of this conversation.
You wanted mollycoddling. Sorry, hun, mollycoddle is a whole nother cape out there somewhere. You get tattletelling. Annoying, hard to confront truths and possibilities. Last night, you dove literally headfirst into powers and everything there was out there. You had a near-death experience. You found out things you weren't ready to learn.
So none of it's the power? I asked.
Antares, honey, you've been in this business longer than I have. You lived it even before you triggered. You should know the answer to that question.
Last night, when Dragon questioned me, I didn't even know my own name.
Isn't that telling?
Tattletale asked. There was something in her tone there that reminded me of who I was talking to. The villain who used information against people. I was bearing my every vulnerability to her in this moment. I almost ended the conversation there. My thumb moved the button to cancel the call, and a twitch or accident could have seen it make contact. Just tell me, I said.
If you're blaming the power to that extent, you're probably wrong. Just like the people who don't take it into consideration at all. It's a worm, wriggling through our heads, too slippery to nail down with a neat, pat explanation. The only correct answers are, I'm not sure, or the mathematician's yes.
That doesn't help narrow things down or figure out a way forward, I said. For me, for my fucking sister, for Contessa.
I think it does. Just so long as you don't reduce. Focus on the totality.
I stared down at the loading dock as a bunch of teenagers in winter jackets clambered onto a big metal cargo thing and attached hooks to bars that were inset into the metal. There were gouges on that, too, spray-painted a bold yellow to warn people to look out. Swansong had been as influenced as anyone I knew. The agent close to the surface because she was a clone, not so different from Valkyrie's flock, from Dennis, from Christopher, from my Aunt Sarah. I thought of every single member of Breakthrough. Each of us had unique relationships to our passengers. Fighting it daily for control over her body, having to meditate to even find a semblance of functionality. Caged by it, portioning out life in turns. Caught up in manufactured dreams and chained to fanatical enemies. Pulled in deep, with tragic qualities and habits turned into tools that fed those same qualities in maybe the deepest spiral I'd known a parahuman to have. Wearing it like a fragile piece of armor. Could it be dismissed or swept up or brushed aside so easily? Each person considered a totality, rather than a person and a problem to either be embraced or defeated by?
I don't know, I whispered. Now you've got it, Tattletale said.
I thought of the Situation Room, which I was overdue to return to. Of the situation, of Contessa, of Teacher, and how Teacher had ended up. I don't know what to do. I'm afraid to step back from this.
I'm being aggressive and acting on instinct, but if I stop, I might lose what I gained last night. I guess you have to weigh whether the cost of being aggressive, instinct girl is heavier than the cost of losing what you got. I clenched my fist. My skin pulled tight, and the missing fingernail throbbed. I shook my head. I can't tell what instincts might actually be my agent telling me things. I know what you said, totality, not assuming anything, but... Welcome to my life, hon. Every hour of every day for the last few years. For what it's worth, I like your instincts. That doesn't make my decision easier, I said. It was only as she'd said it that I realized I was imagining myself tilting more toward the ignore the instincts option. That's not my job. Hard, annoying truths. I'd come here hoping for a revelation. At the same time, I'd wanted to touch base with Swansong, remember my friend by visiting the place she'd died. But of course, it wasn't that simple. None of this was. How long has she had her power? I asked. Contessa? Since she was Kenzie's age. In totality, what does that make her? As person and power together? You said she was defensive, because she has the weight of the world on her shoulders? She can't afford to show weakness. Or disaster strikes. Any number of forces like Teacher would co-opt her. Does she want to destroy those forces? To ensure she can walk on that beach without her power active? She might now. I think she probably wouldn't mind if the especially problematic forces were destroyed in the process of her doing what she thinks she needs to here. It would even play into her goals with laying a solid foundation. Do you qualify? I asked. I might, Tattletale said. Why do you think I have the Undersiders and Heartbroken here? I tensed.